kicked in here.
Some context before I start. It is the season of Lent, and I normally preach to a small Baptist church, and I usually preach from the lectionary, just for a point of context. Genesis 9:7-18 reads, "And then God said to Noah and his sons with him, 'As for me, I am establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the domestic animals, and every animal of the earth with you, as many came out of the ark. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth.' God said, 'This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for all generations. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters will never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. And when the rainbow is in the clouds, I will see it, and I will remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth.' God said to Noah, 'This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth.'" The word of the Lord. So today's reading falls within the first 11 chapters of Genesis. This section, these first 11 chapters, they've been designated the primeval history within the Bible. These chapters tell how God created both a world and a community of men and women. A community of men and women that were created for the express purpose of divine intimacy with God and for care of the creation of his earth. So this passage finds us at the point in this history where humanity has turned from God, and it's with regret and a troubled heart that God makes the decision to cleanse the earth. And he does this with a flood. A flood that is designed to kill all living creatures. But then in God's infinite mercy, God decides to save one man and his family. And he uses this family to rebuild the earth. So after almost 400 days of being cramped inside of this wooden boat with 7 other people, with a multitude of animals, Noah is finally free. So what's the first thing he does? He thanks God. He builds an altar and makes a sacrificial offering to God to thank him for his grace and mercy. In response to this offering, God makes a universal covenant with Noah. As he says, starting in verse 9, "I now establish my covenant with you, with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you." Now this is a pretty important covenant. And to highlight the importance of this covenant, there's 4 important points that I want to note. So first, this covenant is universal in nature. God isn't entering into a covenant with Noah, or just with his family, or even with just humanity. God is entering into a covenant with all of creation, all living things. God made a covenant that he would never again destroy the earth. There are other covenants, like the Abrahamic covenant. These are made with one person, one descendants, one nation. We have this covenant with Noah. It's all-consuming. It is for everyone. Number 2, this covenant is God-initiated. Here we have this all-powerful God who is choosing to enter into a relationship with fallen beings, with his flawed creation. He chooses to reestablish this divine human connection, this relationship that he initially desired with Adam and Eve. This covenant, it's the first definitive step that God has made since that fateful day when Adam and Eve ate the apple. It's the first definitive step to make things right with creation. Things have been steadily spiraling out of control since that day, since they were kicked out of Eden. And this is God taking the initiative to turn things around. Noah was far from perfect, and God could easily have sent him to the same fate as the rest. Yet it was through his grace and mercy that he chose to save these people. And he uses them to rebuild the world. And number 3, this shows that God is a God of second chances. He is a God of mercy and grace. God could have scrapped everything and started over. He did it once, he could do it again. But instead he chose to work with what he already had. He chose to work with humanity. Through Noah and his family, through all the animals he took on the ark, God rebuilt the world. It's a new beginning, but it is also a renewal. God isn't starting over with new beings, but he is using a remnant of what once was. God uses what exists and renews it. And number 4, it shows that redemption can only be found through God. It's only within God that we can find resolution to human sin, to worldly corruption. It doesn't matter what we do, what we think we deserve. As God showed through Noah, it's only by God's grace that we are saved. So, God's covenant is to the flood, what Easter is to Lent. In the same way that Noah needed God's covenant, so too do we need the redemptive power of Easter. During this Lenten season, we're basically little New Age Noahs, kind of floating through our time of preparation, anticipation. We are utterly dependent on God's mercy and grace. So as we consider our participation in Lent and the subsequent celebration of Easter, there are several parallels that can be drawn between the flood that Noah endured and the Lenten season that we are currently in. So firstly, and most obviously, the 40 days. For Noah, they endured 40 days and nights of rain, and then almost 400 days of being cooped up in the ark. For us, Lent is 40 days from Ash Wednesday until Easter, not including the Sundays. Now this is followed by the season of Easter, in which we celebrate the resurrection of Christ. And during this time we think about what does it mean to follow him. Both are periods of transition, of purification, a process that doesn't just happen overnight, but over a period of time. While the earth flooded and the creatures perished, Noah and his family sat in the ark, going through their own period of transformation and purification. They had time to sit and think, to recognize patterns of sinfulness in their lives, and to recognize that they were utterly dependent on God. In our lives, Lent fills a similar role. We turn to God in prayer. We realize that we need him, that we are not totally self-sufficient. We have this holy longing, and we turn to God. Both allow for the creation of space within which God works. The flood cleaned the slate, made everything fresh and new for God to work with. It wasn't a new creation, but a remnant of what once was. He uses that, he works with it, and he makes it good again. Lent is a time when we set aside some of our life. We set it aside in order to be attentive to God's invitation. We create a small space through fasting, through prayer, and almsgiving. This allows for a fuller embrace of the mission that God has entrusted us. And finally, both result in a new covenant with God, a covenant that is universal. God's covenant to Noah was his first, and universal in nature. God's greatest covenant, found through the belief in the death and resurrection of Christ, is also universal. The traditional practices of Lent, fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, they're often seen as a set of religious rules, things to follow, things you have to do. By looking at Lent through the lens of the flood and God's universal covenant made with Noah and the rest of creation, we sort of develop a new understanding for the importance of these spiritual disciplines. We practice these disciplines during Lent to reconnect with God, focus on his covenant that he has made with us through his Son, Jesus Christ. The 40 days of Lent they're a time of preparation, purposeful preparation. God's new covenant with us, revealed through the sending of his Son and Jesus' death and resurrection. Just like his covenant with Noah, through his new covenant, we see God's universal love. We experience the words of 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. Through Christ we are reborn. We are renewed. Despite sinning and falling short of the glory of God, he rebuilds us. He makes us whole again. It's only through God's love, through his infinite grace and mercy, through Christ Jesus, that we have new life. God's covenant with Noah, it means nothing to us if we are unable to experience the grace and mercy of Christ, if we are unable to experience this love. So what I'd ask is, take some time during these 40 days of Lent, contemplate the story of Noah. Out of the waters of destruction, God made a covenant with all of creation, a covenant that later allowed God's new covenant to be experienced by all. Practice the spiritual disciplines of Lent. Fast and make space for God's work in your life. Pray and open your heart to God's leading. And give. Share the blessings that God has blessed you and help others. Thank you.